Apart from serving as chairman of the board of ACFAR, I'm a management and communications consultant, but also serve in Watoto Church as an elder. The topic that I've been given share on is the church in Uganda's response to the challenge of cults and false teaching. The response of the church in Uganda to cults and false teaching. The event we're attending today is called a symposium. And I went to search on the internet, ask Professor Google, well, what is this thing called a symposium? And this is what one of the websites said. A symposium is a gathering of experts presenting their findings on a specific topic within a single day. Experts presenting their findings within a single day. These experts in their fields provide information about their work, their opinion, and perspective on a particular topic or guidelines for future research. That is from www.study.com. I thought, since this is a symposium and we need to present findings, I need to go and do some research on this topic, so that by the time I present, it's based on findings. And I thought I'll also go and talk to experts in the field, those living the experience. And so in my methodology, I engaged a number of church leaders to hear from their own voices, what is the church doing? When you do research, sometimes you do what they call a case study. Because you have to sample, you can't ask everybody. And so for purposes of our presentation this morning, we are looking at a case study of Church of Uganda. Why Church of Uganda? Church of Uganda is the oldest non-Catholic church in Uganda, in fact, even older than the Catholic Church in terms of establishment in this country. It is the largest church in terms of members, in terms of number of churches and congregations. It has the largest number of clergy and pastors. Almost everywhere you go in this country, you find a church, the Church of Uganda, or a member. And therefore, I thought we could use Church of Uganda to learn what they are doing, and the findings can be applied to all other churches. I'm sure there are lessons we can learn from Church of Uganda. My first experience with Kanungu cult was from a Church of Uganda reverend, a friend of mine called Reverend Davis Choncho. Some of you may know him. He's from Kanungu. And I like talking about cult. So I said, what's going on in Kanungu? And he said, there's a new cult in Kanungu, in Nyabugote. And the leaders of this cult are gathering people from the whole Uganda, Congo, Rwanda, and other places. And they're saying that the world will be coming to an end. And they're building Noah's Ark on their hill in Nyabugoto. And so when the world comes to an end, those who will be in the ark are the ones who will be saved. And I thought, that sounds strange. And he said there are many people who are going to live there. The next time I had an opportunity to go to Kanungu, I was on my way to Kisoro. I stopped by in Kanungu. And I looked out for the local chairman and asked him, tell me about this group. Because they were a bit out of Kanungu town on a hill. You could see their buildings as you enter Kanungu town on the left. Tell me about this group. What do you know? He said, well, we don't know much about what they believe or teach. But at least we know two things. One, they already believe in UPE, Universal Primary Education, because they have built a school and all their members attend for free. And the second thing we know about them, which is good, is that all the men in that group who need to be paying graduation tax, we don't bother with them. The group collects the taxes for all the men and the Peters and Amsam. So I know them as good citizens. And I moved on. Cults can be very deceptive. On the surface, they look like they are doing social good or spiritual good. But I think the Bible, Jesus himself called them, they look like innocent sheep, but they are wolves in sheep's clothing. And the Kanungu cult classifies some of this. In my presentation, I will be addressing the following questions. Do cults and false teaching continue to be a challenge in Uganda? Or did it end with Kanungu cult? Number 2, how is the church in Uganda, using Church of Uganda as a case study, responding to the challenge of cults? What are we doing? Are we doing anything? Are we asleep? Are we awake? How are we engaged dealing with cults and false teaching? Number 3, does the curriculum used to train the clergy, pastors, and spiritual shepherds include skilling them to understand and deal with cults? As we prepare our ministers in Bible colleges, seminaries, theological institutions, are we equipping them before we send them to the field? And for those who are already in the field, are there refresher courses for clergy already deployed on how to deal with cults? Because cults, as Julius will tell you, is that they keep changing. You can't use 2-year information had 2 years ago on that cult and you think it's still valid. They've already moved on with a new doctrine, a new practice. So clergy, pastors, prepared to deal with these changes. Number 5, what is being done to prevent congregations from being deceived or recruited by cults, false prophets, and false teachers? Number 6, are there mission campaigns addressing the issue of cults? Are we reaching out on campaigns and crusades and conventions and all these meetings we hold? How much of it is actually addressing the issue of cults, false teachers, and false prophets? Number 7, is the church in Uganda, or Church of Uganda, doing enough in addressing the issue we are talking about today? And finally, number 8, what else is recommended to be done to deal with the challenge of cults in Uganda? Those are the questions that we'll be grappling with in this symposium. In terms of methodology, how did I go around collecting this data, doing this research? I designed a questionnaire, a question guide with these questions. I sampled a number of church leaders from the Anglican Church, and I subjected them to this questionnaire or interview guide through email, through WhatsApp, and some of them I made them face-to-face for interviews. Now, I tried to aim very high. So my list included the Provincial Secretary of the Church of Uganda, the Vice Chancellor of UCU, Head of Mothers Union, and they were busy and not available. But I ended up with some members, some of whom are in this congregation. And the people who responded and participated in my research include the Very Reverend Canon Dr. Rebecca Nyegenye, the Provost of All Saints Church, who formerly was the chaplain of Uganda Christian University in Mukono. The Reverend Captain Titus Baraka, former mission coordinator for the province of the Church of Uganda, and currently Executive Director of Word of Life Radio Ministry in Mukono. Reverend Abraham Alex Wambale, the Acting Coordinator for Missions, the province of Church of Uganda. Reverend Canon Diana Nkesiga, Associate Chaplain, St. Francis Chapel, Kabanyoro. Reverend Professor Edison Karenjo, Professor, Bible Taka School of Divinity, Uganda Christian University. The Reverend Canon Venerable Mike Muhwana, the Provost of St. Andrews of Koto. Reverend Canon Geoffrey Byarugaba, the Vicar of Bugorobi Church of the Resurrection. Reverend Canon Dr. Johnson Ebong, former chaplain St. Francis Chapel, and currently a lecturer at Uganda Matters Seminary in Namgongo. The Reverend Captain Gideon Mwesugwa Muhima from All Saints Church, whom I believe is in this audience. And so and then Canon Edward Gama, who is a human resource and management consultant for Morrison's Church. These are the findings I got from those men and women. Number one, the challenge of cults and forest teaching in Uganda. Is it still a challenge or it's a non-issue? This is what they said. All the people that I interviewed unanimously agreed about the grave matter of cults, forest teaching, confronting Ugandans, both in the church and outside the church. For instance, Professor Karenjo said, cults continue to erode our spiritual foundations. The foundations of the church at stake. They are shaken because of the work of cults. Cults are a big challenge to the Church of Uganda because most of her members fall victims to cult leaders. Cults tend to offer what they are missing in church, such as close attention they get from the cult leaders and members. This is what Dr. Ebong said. The biggest challenge is coming from what? Self-proclaimed pastors, prophets, and apostles that have no accountability or body to check out their doctrine. Reverend Captain Muhumuza. Cults attack the family. They isolate people from everything that could hold them accountable. They turn them against their families, friends, and loved ones. This is leading to marriage breaking, the youth rebelling, and family systems burning within. That is what Reverend Captain Muhumuza said. No wonder many of the followers of these cults now address their leaders as father, as papa. And they pay more allegiance to their spiritual fathers than to the human fathers. They've replaced their fathers. And this is what Professor Karenjo said about this. He said, the youth are largely disillusioned and they lack direction. Most of the so-called churches they go to give simplistic answers to real issues confronting them. For example, they will urge the youth to fast and pray, and many will just come in. All you need is fast and pray, and maybe I can add, and sow a seed. This undermines the core value of hard work. Dr. Nyagenye, who used to be the chaplain of Uganda Christian University in Mukono until recently, shared with me a lot of negative experiences she had with young people who were targeted by cults in Uganda Christian University. She says, I witnessed firsthand many students whose lives were ruined by cults and false teachers that lured them. Some of them never completed their courses. After the apostle or prophet they were following prophesied that they did not need to continue with education. She mentioned about this one young, brilliant girl. The man of God said, God has showed him there's no need to waste time with education. She needs to leave school, college, and go and get married. And she did. Right now she has 2 children, no education, no career, but following false prophet. Young people taken by cults tend to be disobedient, rebellious, and inflexible based on what their spiritual leader has told them. This is because, and I think it was well said by Dr. Paddy Musana, this is because cults and false teachers capture, manipulate, and control the minds of their followers. We're talking about mind control. This is what Reverend Captain Gideon Muhumuza said. Intelligent, well-spoken, and learned fellows can no longer think for themselves. They can no longer reason or make rational arguments for themselves when they're entrapped by cults. You'd wonder why an educated journalist with a lot of experience on TV, radio, newspapers would bow down and lick the shoes of another man. And when he's challenged, he says, I can do it 1,000 times. You find corporates, lawyers, doctors, engineers, teachers, people with PhDs following after a false prophet. And you wonder, when they are doing their work in the office, they're high flyers. But when they come to the fellowship meeting led by the man and woman of God, they seem to have closed their brains and left them at the gate. Because even when you can see that what's being taught is not true, is misleading, they swallow it, all of it. Cults manipulate and take money from their followers, promising them deliverance from curses, and in the end, they end up impoverishing them, including those who are poor and vulnerable. As I was speaking with Captain Titus Baraka, he told me of this woman who can't pay school fees. Children are in boarding school, and she's not paid school fees. And she comes to see him, and he says, the reason I've come, I want you to pray for me. I think there is a curse, a generation curse following me. So I want you to pray for me so that this curse can go away. So the man of God engages her, and then he prays with her. And then she pulls out a package of 500,000 shillings. And she says, take this because you prayed for me. And Reverend Captain Baraka says, no, I didn't pray for you for money. And she was upset. And she says, everywhere I've gone to see men of God, I usually go with money and lots of it. Because it looks like that's when it would work. Now you've prayed for me, but you didn't take the money. I'm not sure whether God has heard your prayers. So the Reverend refused to take the money and said, no, you go away. God has heard your prayers. And she said, I feel relieved, I feel better. After 5 days, she was back. And she said, for 5 days I was feeling well, but 4 days, but on the 5th day, those things seem to have come back to torment me. And I think it's because you didn't take the money. So I brought the money, please pray for me again, please take the money, because the principle, you don't go before God empty-handed. So he said, fine. She said, he had to think quickly. He said, fine. He took the money. And he said, now in this money, 10% should be tithe. So he counted off 50,000. And he said, go to your church. Next Sunday when you meet, make sure you give a tithe to God. Now this 450,000 you give me as a gift, I'm very grateful. But I know you've not paid school fees. I prayed about that for your children. I'm giving it back to you as a gift. Go and pay school fees. And since then, she's been coming for prayers and she's improved. The point I'm trying to make is that cults don't care whether you are poor or don't poor. They will exploit you. In fact, in many of these groups, they say, if you're unemployed, you don't have a job, and you want to be prayed for, bring a large gift. The man of God will pray for you. So if you're unemployed, where do you get the large gift? If your business is not doing well, and they're about to close, URA wants to close you off, you haven't paid rent, if you want to prosper, bring a large gift. Go to the bank and borrow, or borrow from neighbors or friends for God to prosper you. Cults, they cajole their followers to sell their property, land titles, businesses, and other sources of livelihood in a promise of getting more when they sow a seed in the man or woman of God. The adverse effect of this behavior are seen in the abject poverty, broken marriages, and increased criminal behavior, said Reverend Captain Muhumuza. Cults are a real challenge, and they're with us. The second question, how is the Church of Uganda responding? Now that they're aware of all these challenges, how are they responding to the challenge of cults and false teaching? All the leaders that were interviewed unanimously agreed that the Church of Uganda's response to the challenge of cults and false teaching has not been strategic, intentional, or adequate. And it can apply to all the other churches. One of the leaders I interviewed said this: unfortunately, the Church of Uganda does not seem to care about the threats of cults. The leadership is either ignorant about the dangers of cults, or if they know, then they are not good pastors and stewards of those entrusted to them by God. And I've heard the name, I don't need to give you the name, but those are the exact words said by one of the Christian leaders, one of the leaders of Church of Uganda. Another one, this is Canon Biarugaba from Bugorebi Church of the Resurrection. He said, at one time I volunteered to take up leadership of the Uganda Forest Teachers and Cards Task Force, and to provide the resources to interested church leaders in understanding and dealing with both homegrown and foreign-based cults operating in Uganda. But after a while, because it was more like an individual effort, after a while the task force lost steam and it fizzled out. Rather than having a concerted effort at provincial or diocesan level, it has been left to individual clergy to take it up when they feel the need, and they do whatever they think can work for them. So there's no organized way, there's no guidance being provided by the total leadership, by the whole church. Each one is left on their own to do what they think they can do when they feel the pinch of cards for their congregations. For example, Uganda Christian University has started an annual conference on the family with a view of emphasizing, among other things, the need for a Christian foundation for the family, especially for children. So every year, they're addressing the issues of the family. This is what Professor Karenjo said. Reverend Captain Baraka, he says, as an evangelist, I started Words of Hope radio ministry and have radio programs and stations in 16 dioceses. Forest teaching and cards are some of the areas we address in partnership with African Center for Apologetics Research. He also added, I've set up the Bethsaida Ministry Center in Mukono, where we meet seekers and disciple new converts and organize them into accountability groups. Some of them were in the past entangled in cults, following false teachers and prophets. Reverend Nkesiga says, when I was still at All Saints Church, Nakasero, we added the subject of cult awareness on the syllabus of confirmation classes for P7 candidates before they join secondary schools. So just before you confirm them, take them through. Apart from talking about drugs and how to avoid being bullied, they would introduce them to cults because they knew the schools are some of the fishing fields for cults. Some parishes and dioceses have strengthened chaplaincy in church-funded schools who curtail the activities of false gospel preachers in schools. So equipping chaplains to be aware of this danger is one of the things that is being done. But on the other hand, Dr. Nyegenye said, for some dioceses, they do not have sufficiently trained clergy. Some attend pastoral orientation for a couple of weeks, get ordained, and are deployed in ministry. Such encounter problems are not sufficiently knowledgeable and skilled to counter cults and false teaching. But Professor Karenjo says, some dioceses are ensuring that those who serve as ministers and pastors in church have attended the relevant theological training, be able to correct biblical teaching, to offer correct biblical teaching, and to detect false teaching within the church. One of the challenges that was shared almost across board, and probably it affects many other churches. They said there is unregulated and unsupervised prayer schools, intercessors, and overnight prayer meetings that have gone overboard and become entry points for false teachings, especially when spiritual teachers or preachers whose credentials are not known or are suspect are given the pulpits. So on Sunday, the pastor is in church, but this Friday night, overnight, or this midweek service where the pastor doesn't know what's going on, some of the, and they leave it to laymen to invite speakers, they end up inviting suspects, false teachers appearing on the pulpits and misleading the church. On the other hand, some churches within Church of Uganda have taken it upon themselves to facilitate, educate, and empower leaders from their congregations address the issue of false teaching and cults. That's what Reverend Captain Mweswa said. He also added, some churches continue to partner with ministries like ACFAR to teach congregations not only about cults, but also proper reading and studying of scripture. On the issue of training and retraining of clergy about cults and false teaching and false prophets, all the leaders interviewed said there is no training of clergy at theological seminaries specifically on how to address issues of cults, false teaching, and prophets, and false prophets. Around the year 1994, I went to attend an all Christian leaders conference in Nairobi. And it was held at Kasarani Stadium. And we had the hostel there. And because they had leaders from all over Africa, they didn't have enough accommodation. So they paired us up. I ended up with a roommate in the names of Reverend Elfaz Mari, who at that time was the principal of Taka Theological College. And so we got to know each other, talk a bit more, and I told him about my interest and concern about the area of cults. And I told him a lot of research I had done on foreign cults in Uganda, on indigenous cults, around the spiritual foundation, and the state of the Seka. And he said, wow, I didn't know about many of the things you're talking about. So I asked him, but as you train clergy, don't you teach them about this? Because this is what they're confronting in the field. He said, well, we have world religions, Islam, Buddhism, Jewish, but these others have not paid attention to them. And I said, from what I see happening, I think you need to address that. Many, many years later, I was at UCU yesterday, and I was asking the same question. And I got a similar answer. We still teach them world religion, but this area of dealing with cults and false teaching, no, we are not yet there. But I need to add a caveat about training in theology and Bible college. In itself alone, in my view, is not a solution. Alone. Why am I saying that? Father Dominic Kataribabo, one of the cult leaders, actually had a master's in religious studies from one of the prestigious seminaries, Catholic seminaries in the US, Royal Marymount University in Los Angeles, USA. A father, a theologian at master's level, ended up being misled and following an illiterate woman called Caradenia Merinde. If you research, and I'm sure Dr. Pademsano knows this, among the biggest facilitators of Kanungu cult was an Anglican priest, the Reverend Mutazindwa Amoti, an Anglican clergy, who had turned into a politician because at that time he was working as the assistant resident commissioner for Kanungu. At that time, Kanungu was a sub-district within Rukunjiri. But he was based in Kanungu, next door to this cult. He is the one who signed the letter of recommendation to be registered as an NGO. This letter got to Rukunjiri, to the RDC. At that time, he was Yorokam Makerere, and he said, no. The reports I'm receiving about this group, they are not positive. They seem to be a potential danger to society. And so the RDC refused. But soon after, he was transferred to Kasese. And he was replaced by another RDC in the names of Chitaka Gawera. And as soon as they had a new man, they sent Reverend Mutazindwa to take up their case. So he talked to the new RDC, and he said the things you had from the outgoing RDC were rumors, they are not true. And so based on that recommendation, they are registered as an NGO. Now, this cult, Showeteri cult, as you hear, you had the list of people they said had endorsed them. They were very, and most cults are very sharp. They used to give a lot of gifts to the RDC. They were very generous. But in the case of Reverend Mutazindwa, who was living in Kanungu, they offered him house help. There were two nuns, quote unquote nuns from the cult, who were permanently based at his home to do domestic work. And therefore, They were in his good books. I'm saying beyond theology, the clergy need to be the spirit of discernment. I think it was emphasized here. They need a personal knowledge of Jesus Christ, spiritual maturity, and a walk with the Holy Spirit. Number 4, are there mission campaigns on cults? And all the people interviewed said there are conventions, there are missions, but those that address cults are very rare. Once in a while, it may be included as a cult. Number 5, is the church doing enough? All the leaders interviewed said the Church of Uganda was not doing enough in preparing its clergy to deal with cults. There are quite a number of recommendations they made. Number 1, theological and Bible education should be a must for all ministers, evangelists, and preachers. Bible literacy is a must. But also the lay leaders, homestay leaders, Bible study leaders, all need to be knowledgeable, grounded, and mature as Christian leaders. Otherwise, you have the case of the blind leading the blind to the pit. They also recommended that refresher courses in the area of cults should be organized for all pastors. They also recommended that literature on specific cults and forest teaching, both in English and the local languages, need to be produced. Unlike Dr. Musana, for them they had a different opinion on regulation. They say the government should develop guidelines for starting and operating churches so that there is order and accountability. In conclusion, I would like to say the challenge of cults and forest teaching in Uganda is immense. What the church is doing to deal with this challenge is insufficient, sporadic, and not strategic. God has appointed shepherds to take care of his sheep. He will hold them accountable for what they did and did not do. It is time to wake up and do God's bidding in the power. May God bless you.